Hi, my name is David Kitz, and I want to welcome you to this edition of Book Hook with David Kitz. And we have a special guest, as always, and that special guest is Rose Scott. And Rose lives in, I believe, in Surrey. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Langley, actually, we moved here a couple
Langley,
years ago.
okay. Yeah, out on the west coast, okay, or near the west coast. And of course, she's written a book, a fascinating book, which I have read, and had me totally captivated. Okay. This is one of those books that once I got started, it really was hard to put down. Okay. And the title of the book is Threaten to Undo Us. And, well, it's a World War II novel, historical novel. And of course, there's a real, I guess, family connection in here as well. So, Rose, why don't you tell me a little bit about the book or the plot or the what's it all about? Go ahead.
Well, imagine that you're a young mother and you have four children and you're very pregnant with the fifth child. And it's the dead of winter and you hear an announcement out in the street that you have to leave your home right now. So you pack up as much as you can take your children, and it's a war zone out there. The weather is really nasty, even nastier than it is in Ontario right now. Blizzard and snow and ice and cold. And yeah, so that was basically what happened to my grandmother in real life. And
Okay.
the story came about over many, many years of just being with family, listening to the stories, listening to all the little bits and pieces, and starting to realize, oh, this is quite a story. And so I would just in any family gathering, I'd just get whatever scrap of paper and pencil and just start scratching down whatever people were saying as they were saying it.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I probably started doing that maybe in my 20s, and I didn't get the book written until many years later. Finished it 10 years ago.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was a lot in the making.
Well, and it has won an award on from the Word Guild for historical fiction. And that was a number of years ago because the book has been out for a while. And in fact, there's a newer cover version. Could you show
Mhm.
our viewers
Yeah.
this? Okay. A
So it
very,
shows up backwards, I guess, on my screen anyways.
yeah. Well, they're fleeing, they're leaving. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, forced to go.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's a fascinating, well, a difficult story, of course. What exactly is the setting in Europe, I assume? Well, I know, but tell us a little bit about the actual setting
Yes.
of that home where she's fleeing from.
Yeah. So they were actually ethnic Germans living in Poland. And for a bit of a historical backdrop, there were many Germans that lived all over Europe. And we were still at that time in the 20th century coming out of like empires and kingdoms. And Poland in particular had been shunted back and forth between the major powers. Um, Parts of it had been controlled by Russia, parts of it by some of the German states. It was often under different administrations and wasn't necessarily a free country for much of history, actually. And anyways, my grandparents had lived there on both sides for several generations. We're not sure, I think it had to possibly had to do with an invitation from Catherine the Great, who invited German settlers to come into the different lands and set up homes there and farms. And they were all really good at farming. That was kind of their thing. So yeah, my grandmother lived on a farm, as most people did, and they were reasonably prosperous, as far as I understand, uh, with the usual farm animals and things. One of the things my Oma did was she made clothes from flax,
Oh,
and I actually have a picture of my
linen, I guess that
yeah,
becomes right.
linen,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So the whole process of making that is just unbelievable. It's very labor intensive. You have to grow the flax, then you have to harvest it, then you have to soak it like in a pond, then you have to dry it out, which apparently is a very smelly process. Then you have to take the outer husk off. I think that's called scutching, and you basically attack it to get the outer husk off, peel that off. Eventually, you have to comb it out. Then you have to uh, spin the thread. Then you have to weave the fabric,
Right.
and then you finally sew the clothes.
Wow.
So I guess after the during the war, that was such a labor intensive thing, and the fields would have been needed more for food, and so that idea sort of died down. The area that they lived in was Lodz, Lodz on the map, south uh, southwest of Warsaw. They lived in that general vicinity, probably about a half-hour drive away.
Hmm.
And that area was very well known for textiles.
Hmm.
There'd been a big, like during the Industrial Revolution, they really had a good textile industry there. So, anyways, the family had been there for generations. Um, and of course, during the war, what happened was uh, as the as the threat of war began, people were encouraged to start up sort of a self-defense against the Russians or whoever might come and try and fight. And of course, the Germans set up their own little self-defense units. And what happened when the Germans actually invaded Poland was then those self-defense units were absorbed into the German army. And at that point, there was no choice about that. It was like fight or go to
Yeah.
jail, fight or
Yeah.
die.
Yeah.
um, so anyways, my grandfather ended up in the German army. Thankfully, he was spared from actual combat because he had a problem with his feet. He had I think it was flat feet that were the issue. So he couldn't march for long distances. So that meant he got to do something a little more a little safer, I guess you could say, where he was a supply runner. And but eventually in the war, and this happens in the book, he's taken captive by
Yes.
the Russians as they're invading. So yeah, Poland is a very interesting place. I we actually went there in 2009. My family had never been back to Poland. They'd been to Germany to visit various relatives, but they'd never been back to Poland. And in fact, when I came up with this idea and was encouraging my parents to go with me, um, my Oma says, Poland, what do you want to go there for? She didn't
It's
have
rather
very good
interesting.
memories. Yeah.
I have a certain interest in this as well. My grandparents on my mother's side were from the exact region, that you're from. When I say they were from Poland, what is
Mhm.
now Poland, okay? But they had the good fortune, my grandfather had the good fortune of getting out of what was really Russia at the time, because at that point they were under Russian control, and there was no Poland, and that was in 1912, 2 years before the First World War. Okay, and they came to Canada. So, so when I heard, kind of the location of that, I had this natural identification with, hey, this is the region or that my people came from, you might say, my grandparents came from on my mother's side. On my father's side, they were actually farther into the Ukraine area. But again, German background. And so exactly what you just said, there were literally millions of German speaking people in Eastern Europe. And after the war, they were all forced out. Okay. As the war came to an end, they all fled to Germany, and then many of them ended up in Canada, even as your parents did. So there was, I don't know, I have this personal connection with your story, and I'm sure there are probably others who do. But I think one of the things that I find interesting, maybe you could talk about this, is that well, I just found a lot of connections with this whole idea of well, um, just the love. And there is a God element in this. I have to say this. You know, this family was a family of faith. They had faith in God. And I think one of the things that where it really comes out, at least for me, and I don't want to necessarily spoil the story, okay? But the father, when he's captured and by the Russian army and put in a prison camp in Russia and basically being starved to death, and then has this, how would I say, almost an encounter with God in some way. Maybe could you just tell us about this a little bit? And this apparently was, part of this is this, the fascination I have is the reality of that experience. It's one thing to hear about these in a general sense, but then to have kind of a personal link to something like this. Could you speak to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I often tell people it's a novel, so I
Yeah.
made up a lot of it. But the parts of it that seem most unbelievable are actually the parts that actually happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that kind of angelic encounter, that was a story that my grandfather told. And my grandfather, um, I can't even say that I knew him well because his English wasn't very good. Only my dad is German, my mom isn't, so I didn't have the language
Right.
growing up other
A
than
name like
hearing it from
Scott, I guess you've
relatives.
got.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
took some German school and so on. But anyways, I didn't have that communication with my grandfather. And he wasn't the sort really to communicate. He seemed to me to be quite a formidable man. You'd come up to the yard and he would be there with his big scythe cutting the grass.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I mean also at the kitchen table reading the Bible. So I do have some of that, or playing his mandolin. But I didn't have a lot of conversations with him. A lot of what I got from his story was secondhand through my dad, through my aunts and uncles,
Mm.
the things that he had said. But anyways, he was not one for tall tales. And that encounter was relayed to me, not exactly as I wrote it. I played with it a lot. And the thing about faith in the book for me was when I set out to write the story, although I'm a person of faith, I'm a Christian believer, I really think it's important to share your faith whenever you can. But growing up and in all my years of reading, I have often found Christian novels very unsatisfying.
Mm.
And I hate to say that in some ways because I know people put big efforts into their writing. And but I just often have found that plots have been contrived
Hmm.
around,
Hmm.
oh, everybody follows the right path. Your main character is just about perfect, and
Yeah, yes,
everybody
yes,
becomes a
yes.
Christian in the end, and it's
Yes.
all nice and happy and fluffy and
Yep,
cozy.
yep, yep.
And when I set out to write this story, I wanted to tell the story. That was paramount to me. But I also, because I'm a Christian, I want to honor God in everything I do.
Yeah.
So I just started writing. And um, through that whole process, somehow themes came to me. The story of faith came to me, woven into it in a way that I could not have come up with myself.
That
Um,
I just really want to affirm you in that. It really, for me as a reader, I was really drawn into the story, into what was happening. There was a realism to your writing, okay? And I think what you were saying about how sometimes you're a bit reluctant about Christian novels, okay? I completely get that because sometimes they do seem a bit contrived and too maybe indirectly preachy. This is not preachy at all. It just gives you that sense of, oh my goodness, this is the struggle that these people went through, and and um, and how, yeah, God met them in the deepest and most difficult times, and in many ways it was not a happy and easy and all went well, okay, kind of story. In fact, it's just the opposite for a good portion of it. There's this gathering darkness, this deep cloud, and I think in many ways it's kind of fitting at our time right now because we have these gathering clouds, I would say, in on our continent this time, okay? And so I find it, well, there's some ominous parallels that with our present situation, which makes me want to urge readers to actually get, people who love books, to get it, because it kind of it's a novel, I think, in many ways for our time. Would you agree with that, Rose, or am I projecting
Yeah.
too much into it?
Yes, I think so. For me, as I wrote this, and like you say, your own family background is similar, and I started to realize that, oh, we know all these other German people, and most of them went through something similar. A lot of them didn't talk about it very much. But, as I started to ask questions, I realized, oh, they went through similar things. In fact, one of my parents' good friends that they were friends with all the time I was growing up. My mom went to high school with a wife, and we would get together for dinners. We went on vacation sometimes with his family, and years later, um, like probably 25 years into their friendship, my dad and the friend discovered that they were in some of the same camps
Oh,
in
okay.
Poland.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
And they just never talked about it.
Talked
So
about it, never talked about it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so what I'm kind of saying is that it's a broader perspective. It's not just my family's story. It's represents a whole group of people. And I think, like you say, it can transcend then and now. You think it's far away and long ago, but no, the same sort of things are happening now. And you look at
Yeah.
what's happening in the
Yeah.
world, you look at what's happening, um, you know, that
Across
war
the
could be on the
border.
horizon at any point.
Yeah.
War is
Yeah.
going on in some places right now.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
It's very
And
active wars in some places. In Ukraine,
mhm,
it's very active, and
yep, people are having
yeah, yeah,
to
and
flee for their lives. And I think what people sometimes don't realize in totalitarianism is it's very easy to look at the whole um, Nazi picture and go, well, people should have stood up, people should have stopped that. Um, it's very easy for us looking back at that to think that we would do that. But at the same time, you have to really realize what the price of that would be to
yep,
your well-being, to your family, to your life.
yep,
There were people that stood up, but they were few and far between. And there was good reason because when things get to that point of totalitarianism, you are left with very few choices. And the choices are not usually between good and evil, they're between bad or worse.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yep,
and
yep,
ordinary people get put into positions where they have to make a choice that we would consider just horrible, maybe morally wrong, but that's the choice that they have.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so it's not always a cut and dried,
yeah,
easy, easy thing to do.
yeah, yeah. I agree, and we live in difficult times where we can see some of these things emerging as well,
Mhm.
and so I think the book has a real relevance for our time, as I said earlier. Um, Rose, I just want to thank you for this. I know in my reading of the book, I just thought, wow, this is something I wish a lot more people would read, partly because it's just such a great story. Okay. I think the best stories are great stories. I mean, there's stories where there's conflict and there's an overcoming, or there's and it draws us deep and it's well written. And so I want to congratulate you. That word award was well deserved. Okay. And so I'll just leave our readers with the thought of, hey, if you're looking for a book, something to grip you or to really take you to a different time and place, but leave you with also a sense of hope, okay? And I think this is a wonderful choice. And the title is Threaten to Undo Us, and the author is Rose, and it says Seiler Scott. Am I saying that second name or correct?
Okay, so in German, remember
Oh, it's Sailor.
that
Seiler.
EI is pronounced I,
Yeah, yeah,
Seiler.
Seiler. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my
Okay.
writing name, and I chose that because Seiler is a German name,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's my maiden name, and so I chose that because I thought it'd give me a little bit more cred than Scott.
Okay, okay. Well, in my view, you have a lot of cred. By the way, you also have a leading role in our chapter out on the West Coast there, and I want to thank you for all you do in representing the group you're in, the Surrey writers, and I appreciate your efforts in that respect. So. With that, I'm just going to say farewell and thank you so much for joining us for this
Well, thank you for having me.
edition.
Really appreciate the opportunity. And
Okay,
if there's any writers out in Surrey, Langley, even anywhere in the Lower Mainland that want to join our writing group, you're most welcome. I'm sure
that's
David can put you in
great.
touch with me.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. God bless you and take good care.
Thank you, David.